We yell because we're frustrated, right? I mean, we don't yell because we really like to. That's why you're watching this video. We yell, we're frustrated, but we also yell because in the short term, it kind of works, right? When I yell at my kids get scared and then they, jump up for a bit and, finally listen a little bit. The problem, though, is that yelling or any really strong punishment doesn't teach anything. Instead, what it does is it forces compliance. The problem with that is that our children really don't learn. And I'll give you a perfect analogy. Anyone who knows the New York, New Jersey area knows that speed limits are not really what's expected. The parkway says 65 miles an hour, but if you're only driving 65, people will start honking at you because, it's expected that you're going faster. But if you go too fast, the sides of the roads are covered with police. When I go to other states, and I'm always amazed by how I'm not seeing people pulled over every few feet. And in New York, it's like, oh my gosh, everywhere people are being pulled over. But there's a sort of line where that line is. And it's sort of, you go over 10 miles an hour, over the speed limit, you might get pulled over. You go under, you very unlikely will get pulled over. So when I drive down the Garden State, I'll put my cruise control at 9 miles over and I'll drive. And I'm pretty comfortable that I won't get pulled over. I see a cop, I'll slow down, but basically, I'm fine. Now here's the thing. I don't want to go faster because if I go faster, I'm afraid I'm going to get that citation. It'll cost me and I don't like that. But if I was sure that there were no police and no one was going to give me a ticket, for whatever reason, I may not drive 130, but I might drive 85. You know why? Because that whole fear factor didn't teach me anything. It was all about force. And when that force wasn't there, I'll do what I feel is right. And I feel it's fine if there's no cars around. I'm pretty comfortable driving for a long enough time. There's no cars on the highway. I'll be okay driving 85. Now, whether you like driving 85 or not, the point over here is that when we use force, we don't teach lessons. No matter how many times I've been driving at 75 because I'm scared of the cops, if I would know there were no cops, for whatever reason, cops stopped existing, that would be terrible. But just imagine I would be driving 85. Same with our kids. Doesn't teach lessons. But there's other issues too. It creates a very negative environment. Children don't do well in negative environments. Children blossom in positive environments. When everything is negative, they're going to act out more. Here's another one. It only works short term. I have so many parents coming to me, things didn't work, but now as the child gets older, it's gotten really much, much, much worse. Because the whole reason they listened was because dad, mom had this power, but now they're a teenager, right? And sort of they could push back. They don't like being told what to do. It doesn't work long term. They also start calling our bluff, so that's another reason why it doesn't work long term. Besides for all that, the most critical concept, maybe the most critical concept that we want to give our children in order for them to grow is for them to be able to be and accept it. Like a plant, if you don't let the roots expand, it can't grow up. It needs to have enough space in that pot, in that planting pot, in order for it to grow up. Because it got to be able to spread itself. Same with humans. You put someone in a difficult culture, whether it's by work or in our own homes, and they feel pressured and they feel under stress and they feel like they're not accepted and they can't be themselves, very difficult to grow. Very difficult to grow. And one other reason, just because, is we're not great role models when we scream. We want to teach our children what's good and what's right. And when we're losing control and screaming, that's not what we want. But what we did say was that fear played a role. It forced compliance. And the truth is, children need a little bit of that. Not fear, but they need repercussions. They need discipline. If you take children, you don't give them discipline, they will not grow up the way that we would like them to be. And any home that doesn't have that may sound nice in theory, but it doesn't actually work. The difference is that the discipline doesn't have to be the driving factor. We're going to transform our lives and our children's lives. And we're going to do that by keeping discipline there, But discipline isn't what's forcing the behavior. Feeling good about it, the reasons, the want to do right, the positivity in their lives, the good environment is what's allowing the behavior to continue or pushing the behavior. The discipline sort of guardrails on the side. And I like to think about it like a ball rolling down a hill. If you want a ball to roll down a hill, it will roll because there's the force of gravity that's pulling it down, right? And the force of the ball rolling before it. But if you want to keep it on a certain track, you would put lines on the side, right? You would put guardrails or whatever it is to keep it in place. The guardrails aren't pushing the ball down. The positive energy is. The guardrails are keeping it there, and they're also teaching the child to learn lessons about discipline. And let's get right to it. How do we do that? First step is that we're stopped trying to force things and we're letting our actions talk for us. That way we don't have to yell and scream because it's not about me. The way we do that is that there are two options. There's either listening or there's a repercussion. The repercussion has to be something they don't like. It has to matter to them. And it also has to be something, and this is critical, that we have full control of. If we tell them, if you don't come inside, you're not going outside tomorrow, but they're going to go outside anyway, and tomorrow we're going to have to scream at them, that's not going to work. Got to be something we have full control over. What does this look like? Let's take a young child. Young child is playing with a toy, and they're fighting with their siblings. They're not sharing, whatever it is. What we tell them is, I need you to either share your toy and play nicely, or I have to take it away. That's the first step. We're going to go through a bunch of steps here. Not too many, but a couple that together work together to make this happen. But the first step is two options. I have control over them, over the other option. I'm not going to have to fight about it. I'm not going to have to fight about it and something that my child doesn't like, right? You have an older child. Maybe it's an allowance. Maybe it's time on the computer. Maybe it's screen time. But it's something that I actually have control over. Once my child, I don't have that control, that's a problem. And what we're going to get to at this end of this video is what to do when everything's a mess and I have no control over anything. I can't just start up and say to do that. So listen to the end for that. So far we got two options. One of them is listening. One of them is something that they don't like, but I have control over. Here's the next piece. Tell them why. Don't make it about, because I said, why do I have to listen? Because I told you so. Don't do that, because that's about force. Tell them why, but don't get into a discussion with them about the specifics. So, you got to shear. Now, it's pretty obvious why you got to shear and not beat up your sibling, but because she's crying, because it's hurting her. And if your kid says, no, it's not fair, we're not going to get into an argument about whether it's right or wrong to beat up your sibling. We're just going to say, either we can listen because she's crying and I don't want her to be sad and we have to share, or I'm going to take away the toy. So we give them the reason so that there's a focus here. An older child, where it gets much tougher, got to come in on time. And the kid says, well, I'm not tired. Everyone else gets to play outside. No one tells me they don't have curfews. You have curfews. You're the worst mom. You're the worst dad. I don't want you to be tired tomorrow. And I want you to have energy and I want you to be healthy. I'm going to do it. It's fine. I'm sorry. I know you really want to, but I really want you not to be tired tomorrow. Don't get into a discussion about it, but give them the reason. And now let's get to something critical. Next step here is when they do it, be very positive and explain their accomplishments so they feel good about it. Don't just tell them that's great, that's amazing. It's something we talk about a lot, something I call indirect explanation. Describe their accomplishment in a very meaningful way. I love how you shared your toy and made her happy. We're describing the accomplishment. Or we can describe the effort. It's so hard when you really want to play with something. I love how you listened anyway, right? It was hard to come inside. That was so responsible, right? We're making them feel good about it, not by telling them you're great or amazing, but by getting them to see for themselves what was accomplished. That's the key. It's not about us, it's about them. And now we get to the most critical component and the biggest point behind this whole thing. And that is, what we're doing here is we're not fighting with our kids anymore. We're not forcing them to do it. We're actually okay for them to get the repercussion. The reason why we're okay with it is because that will be a learning lesson for them. They don't like it. Remember we said it's something that they don't want to happen. They don't want it to happen. So they're not going to like it. And then it will be a learning lesson for them. So we don't really mind, except we kind of feel bad because we want them not to get it. So we will be calm because we have the repercussions in place. We don't really care if they don't do it, but we'll kind of help them. You know, I really don't want you to lose your time tomorrow. So you think it's a good idea if I call you? I'm on their side. And that's really the key of all of this. We're moving away, and for some people this is so different because we're so used to using force, but we're moving away from force and we're actually joining their side. We're letting the repercussions that they don't like play itself out so that they have lessons to learn. We're building them for what they did. We're making them feel good about what they accomplished. But remember I said, what happens if it's all a mess? And you're thinking to yourself, there's no way this is going to work. Well, I'm going to turn around my whole house tomorrow. There is what to do about that. The key is that we don't overdo this. That means that we start with one thing, not a million things, one thing. Sometimes I tell people to start with just listening when they're told. And even that, to only do it sometimes. But what that does is it allows me to use it whenever I need to, because it's either you're listening or you're not. But it's one thing. Start with one. Build them when they're doing it. Make sure the consequences are things you have control. Explain why. Stay on their side. And when you do that, you create a new system. But there are some caveats. And here's a couple. Number one, we have to be able to be calm. If we're overly stressed, this is not going to work. And it's much better for us to tell our children, hey, I need a couple minutes before I answer, than to start doing this when we're upset. Because remember we said in the beginning of the video, a big reason why we yell is just because we're frustrated. Got to give ourselves that time. We got to take care of ourselves so that we are in a calm enough space to do it. Another caveat. Sometimes we ask our children to do things that aren't really stage appropriate. That means they're bound to make mistakes because they're not really up to doing it. And when we do that, we just create fear because it's not really on their level. The key here is not to do things that they're not capable of doing. We got to understand what they're up to, and maybe we'll get to that in other videos. And one more for the last tip over here, and that is, whenever we're doing any of this, any of these situations, we got to remember that we're doing it for our children's sake, because this is going to help them grow. And when we do that, we're able to join them. But when it's about, I can't manage, then we're going to lose control and we won't be able to take care of it. So any questions, let me know on the bottom. Maybe I missed a couple points. Let me answer all your questions. Like the video, subscribe for more like this, and let's change the world one video at a time.